Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving deep into UK employment law. Now, this is a massive part of the ACCA syllabus for sure, but it's also a set of rules that really affects almost every single one of us. So, let's get right into it.
So let me ask you a question that sounds incredibly simple. Are you an employee? You probably think you know the answer, right? But, in the eyes of the law, that question is way more complicated than it seems. And getting that answer wrong, well, that can change everything, from your rights to your pay to your job security. So our first job is to figure out how to define the working relationship. This is the absolute foundation for everything else, for all of the employment rights that follow. The big question we have to answer is, are you an employee or are you self-employed? Okay, so the law makes this really critical distinction. An employee works under what's called a contract of service. That one tiny word, of, is doing all the heavy lifting here. It signals a relationship where the employer has a real degree of control and there are obligations on both sides. So, how do courts actually decide? Well, they don't just look at your job title. Nope. Instead, they use a whole series of tests to get to the truth of the relationship. They ask questions like, who really has the control here? Who decides how and when the work gets done? Is there a mutual obligation? Does the company have to offer you work and you have to take it? How integrated are you? Do you have a company email address? Are you on the team chart? And maybe most importantly, who's taking the financial risk? Who bought the laptop? Who loses out if a project fails?
And here's why this is so important. Your status is what determines your rights. If you're an employee, you get the whole package of legal protections, minimum wage, sick pay, you name it. But a self-employed contractor? They're working under a contract for services, and they have very few of those automatic protections. Think of it this way. You hire a plumber to fix a specific leak. That's a contract for a service. But if you hire someone to be the full-time plumber on your staff, that's a contract of service. That little word makes all the difference in the world.
Okay, so we've defined the relationship, but what happens when that relationship ends badly? This brings us to two terms that people mix up all the time but are legally completely different: unfair dismissal and wrongful dismissal. Yeah, getting dismissed is never simple, at least not in legal terms. The law draws a really clear line between the reason you were let go and the process the employer used to do it. You can think of it as the why versus the how. Right, let's break this down. Unfair dismissal is a statutory right. That means it comes directly from an act of Parliament. It's all about whether the reason for firing you was fair and if a fair procedure was followed. Wrongful dismissal, on the other hand, that's all about a simple breach of contract. It's rooted in common law. So, for instance, did your boss fire you without giving you the notice period that's written in your contract? That could be a wrongful dismissal, even if the reason they fired you was totally legit. And for unfair dismissal, there's a really important number to remember: 2 years. Generally, an employee needs to have 2 full years of continuous service before they can even make a claim. It's a massive hurdle, and it stops a lot of claims from new employees right in their tracks. So far, we've been talking about dismissals linked to performance or maybe conduct. But what if the job ends and it's really nobody's fault? That brings us to our final key concept, the no-fault ending we call redundancy. And believe me, it has its own very strict set of rules. The legal definition here is super specific. Redundancy happens when a business's need for employees to do a particular kind of work has basically ended or reduced. Maybe it's because of new tech or a location closing down. The crucial thing to get here is that redundancy is about the role being cut. It is not about the person in that role or their performance. Now, because it's still technically a form of dismissal, an employer has to follow a fair procedure. If they mess this up, a completely genuine redundancy can actually turn into an unfair dismissal claim. They have to have a real business reason, they have to use objective and fair criteria to choose who is let go, and they absolutely must consult properly with the employees who are affected. So when you pull it all together, you can see these 3 pillars of employment law. First, you have to define the employment status. Second, you need to know the difference between an unfair and a wrongful dismissal. And third, you have to understand the strict rules around redundancy. This isn't just exam knowledge. This is the essential toolkit for navigating your rights and responsibilities in the real world of work. And that leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. In this world of the gig economy, of freelancers and delivery apps and portfolio careers, is that fundamental line we started with, the one separating an employee from someone who's self-employed, is that line becoming permanently blurred? That's really the central challenge facing UK employment law today. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.